So the regional data center landscape in addressing the current and future demand. Yeah, all right. Well, sounds like power and the demand we're going to talk about. So I'm very honored to have these senior execs next to me and experts, and I'll give them a quick round to introduce themselves. Me, you know, you don't want to know anymore, so that's fine. So I'll start with Elaine.
My name is Elaine Dixon. I'm part of the Netix team, which is part of the Natera group. And at Natera, we own and operate 4 of our own data centers. So whilst I don't deal directly with data centers and co-location, I do as part of a wider group.
Plus, she is my colleague moderating sessions, especially this morning, Women in Tech. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Duncan.
Yeah, hi, Duncan Clubb. I run the data center practice for Cambridge Management Consulting. My background is actually in IT. I was a software developer for a long time, moved into infrastructure. So my perspective is slightly different to most, but I've been in the data center industry now I think I built my first one 30 years ago.
Oh, yeah, well, there was a good old day when the people were still smashing money in it, right?
Yeah, and we called them computer rooms.
Yeah, exactly. But that was a long time. You were not even born, you know? Well, anyway, we go to Robert.
Hello, my name is Robert Wallen. I'm a managing director over at Natixis Corporate Investment Bank. In the telecom sector, we are covering everything from advisory to working capital facilities, M&A, anything that requires any kind of financial support. We are a dedicated team within the Natixis group, which is one of the large French banks, and we are owned by Banque Populaire and Caisse d'Épargne. Gives us access not only to a large network, but also locations all over the world. In data center financing, we are probably top 5 globally. We are supporting most of the data center activities, whether it is in Americas, EMEA, or APAC. And well, we've been doing data center financing for the last, I would say, 10, 15 years.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you for being here. And last but not least, Mark.
Thank you. Mark Acton, Future Tech. Future Tech are a design consultancy, engineering design consultancy, who only work on data centers. So it's a very much a sort of specialist and niche. We operate really around Europe and into Africa, some Middle East as well. We have operated in the Americas and we have operated in Asia, but I would say really it's EMEA where we're working mostly. My particular role, actually a little bit like Robert, I get involved in technical consulting. So we will also do the engineering consulting for M&A, for acquisitions, etc. So we come in as the engineering experts and say whether it actually works as a data center or not. So again, that's where I sit. And you know, I've been in this industry since 1995. So hopefully I've actually learned something along the way, believe it or not.
Cheers. So thank you so much for being on this panel, and let's keep this a bit interactive and let's just bump into it. So talking about the landscape, Duncan, you from Cambridge with your helicopter view, seeing and watching what's going on. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What's the demand out there? Just a quick overview of the landscape of the data centers, what we're talking about.
So at the moment, everyone's talking about demand going crazy, mostly driven by AI. There's a whole bunch of other things going on as well. But I think in terms of regional data centers, there's a huge opportunity, mainly because the traditional hubs in the UK and pretty much everywhere are full. There's no power left. Land's very expensive if you can get it at all. And to be honest, the reasons that we used to put data centers in Slough and Docklands and a very small number of other places around Europe, those reasons aren't really that important anymore. In fact, there are lots and lots of very good reasons why demand is going to drive data centers out of these hubs. So moving compute nearer to where it's being used is really important. And give you one very simple example in the UK. Right? So, 80% of the data center capacity in the UK is in Slough and Docklands. Right? 90% of the economic capacity of Britain is not in Slough or Docklands. So it's a very simple equation. You know, oh, and by the way, out of the remaining 20%, 10% of that, well, half of that is in Newport. So 10% of the country is covered with, no, sorry, the rest of the country has just got 10% of the capacity in it. So that's opening up the opportunity. Things like connectivity are just getting better and better throughout the country. So, you know, the carriers have been putting in significant amounts of new backbone going up and down the country, and also now across, which is really interesting. And in fact, now the fastest, lowest latency connectivity to the US is in Blackpool, in the northwest of the country. And we've now got major transatlantic routes coming in via places like Newcastle. So, you know, there's a lot of new capacity being deployed, which is opening up the market for new locations. Still early days, but I think there's a massive amount of opportunity coming.
Robert? Quick overview of what you see.
No, but I would agree wholeheartedly on that we are seeing a diversification of the locations of data centers, not only because of the power aspect, which is extremely important, of course, but also because it's from a security point of view, having everything in one spot. It's good for connectivity, but in case something bad happens, it's not an ideal situation. So what we are seeing is that some of the data center operators, they are used to have managed this on a logistics point of view. So they have sort of central warehouses, and then they have smaller warehouses, and they are distributing it, making sure. One of our hyperscale clients is building a distributed data center over 30 locations, and they're connecting those with fiber. And in these hubs will then attract other people to locate themselves there as well. And you will have an infrastructure built around that. So from our point of view, we are seeing a lot of new build taking place in secondary and tertiary, and even further out than that.
Okay, Mark?
Sure, I totally agree. I think you're seeing development in the so-called tier 2, tier 3 markets like Northern Mediterranean, sort of, you know, south coast of Europe, north coast of Africa, going west, even into Africa itself, into sub-Saharan Africa. Yes, power is absolutely paramount. There's no question, but it's also the type of power. So getting power is one thing, but the type of power, increasingly, most of the big data center, be it hyperscaler or colo, they're kind of weaponizing ESG at the moment. So they're trying to bring in whether it's PV or whether it's tidal or whether it's wind. So they're all trying to get that. And there are some parts in Africa where they've got, you know, significant amounts of hydro, significant amounts of PV, etc., and they're taking advantage of it. But then, yes, you've got the connectivity part of it too. If you simply look at where the cables are coming up the east and west coast of Africa and where they hit land, I mean, that's where people are building data centers right now. That's where the hubs are. You know, it's not rocket science. So you're going to see areas of like that increase, and there will be then, as Duncan said, increasing penetration into the center of Africa. At the moment, the center of Africa is relatively poorly served, but that will change. And then I think you've also got other drivers like sovereign cloud, sovereign AI. People want to have those platforms within their own country. They want a degree of control over it. So yeah, I think all those factors I mean, that we're moving away from the traditional flat markets as Duncan said, and tier 2, tier 3 is absolutely, I mean, it's happening. You know, we as a company are involved in design projects literally all over the region, but very little in London, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, or Paris right now. Certainly not Dublin. I mean, Dublin's really struggling right now. So.
Thank you. Elaine, I mean, we heard the guys of the challenges they're facing and what might even pop up. But from the demand side, how do you see, let's say, the landscape? And not, of course, not, let's say, purely the data center, but on the connectivity, on the peering. How do you see, what do you see? What are your challenges?
Sure. Well, Something that I found interesting is with data centers, how it used to be the classic have a data center in a populated area and people will naturally come. But something I've noticed is it's kind of splitting off in two ways as well, because some places are like, yes, 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 we need the more connectivity, we need the bigger data center. So you've got the massive hyperscalers, like absolutely huge, dealing with all the high power computing and AI. But then you've also got a lot of, which I think is an incredible innovative use of it, but container ship containers, how they're being transformed into small data centers. So they're not going to be serving a huge area, but they are just little pods that are getting dropped off. And again, the connectivity side of things, that's where the issue is. However, there are different ways that you can connect. It doesn't always have to be point to point with Ethernet. Something that we use at Netix to connect people who might not be in one of the data centers that we're in is tunneling over internet. Whilst it's not a perfect solution and it's not going to be absolutely fail safe because you are relying on a third party.
But it is a solution.
It is a solution. It gets you the information that you need. It gets you connected to the internet. It gets you connected to other people. So yes, it is hard to take these small containers that are no bigger than, like, I don't know, a small...
A container.
Yeah, a container. I was trying to think of what's the measurement, but it's like a few meters by a few meters, we'll just call it for ease. So it is hard to be able to put in protected Ethernet routes. That's just not going to happen. But you can easily get some sort of connectivity. And then once you use that, then you can access it. So I think we've noticed an uptake in that on that side of things. And we have noticed a huge growth in our peering solutions that we offer, which makes it just so much easier for people to access other networks, other data centers if they need to, by using our peering fabric and then just kind of hopping on board and getting to where they need to be. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. We tipped on it already a little bit. I mean, the power, power is an issue. But what I would like to, emphasize actually here, how big that as an issue is, because it is quite difficult. It's quite expensive, and power availability will be more and more an issue. I mean, cloud computing, okay, we got this, right? 80% of the enterprises, they stored their, everything is in the cloud already. Let's assume this. Let's say 70, 80%. And they're full. They're already struggling with power. AI is here. And this will only start off. We don't need the power from now. We need 10 times the power we have today in the future, in the coming future. How are we going to tackle that? What will be, how can we handle that? What can we do? What do we need to look out for? Robert, maybe you can give me your views on it.
Well, as a financial institution, we're not only doing telecom and tech, even if I consider that the most important part. But other parts of the bank, they do work on a renewable energy and energy where it is required. And what we are seeing right now is, shall we say, the beginning of a proper conversation between power generators and off-takers in terms of where to locate and how to locate and with what to locate. Naturally, there are many ideas on how to find solutions to these, and some of them are easier than others. If you're fortunate enough to have a nuclear power plant idle around you, then you can make use of it relatively quickly. But we have a situation like in Ireland, for example, where it's like an Australian barbecue. You have to bring your own. So you have a data center and you have to bring your own power. And so we are seeing now on the financing side, projects that are coming to us basically said, okay, we're going to have a power plant and we're going to have a data center. So we need financing for the totality. Mm-hmm. And this is just the beginning.
Okay. Duncan?
So everyone in the data center industry got very excited over the last couple of years about building hundreds of megawatts, gigawatts of capacity. I actually think when the market settles down, there'll be a handful of gigasites, and actually the mass market, I think, is going to be significantly smaller. So you're going to see AI platforms of 5, 10, 20 40 megawatts, not the 500 and the 1,000 megawatts. So it's going to make it a little bit easier to see how the future pans out. There is still power available in Britain, not around Iver, which feeds Slough and a few other places, but there's a lot of new renewable capacity coming on stream. And if you time things properly with that, link it up with energy storage systems and use the right type of connectivity into the grid, then there are actually solutions. It's just going to, it's not all available today. But let's not forget, I mean, you can't build a 100, 200, 500 megawatt data center in a small amount of time anyway. So it is an issue, but I don't think it's the big, massive deal that we think it might be. I think we're going to be okay.
Not only the availability, it's also the cost.
Well, the cost is, and so actually going back to what you were saying earlier, there's a lot of issues around data sovereignty. People want everything to be here, but the most logical place to do your really big energy consumption is somewhere like Iceland or Finland or somewhere in the Nordics, because it's dirt cheap and it's renewable. But actually, I think demand is going to be very different, because the people who are actually going to pay for this at the end of the day are going to want their stuff local. There's going to be a lot of concern about security, about data sovereignty, and about transferring over large international networks. So that's going to drive a lot of demand back into the regions, because that's where the people who end up paying for this are going to want it located. So it's again, it's going to drive a lot of medium-sized capacity requirements.
So it is, I was exaggerating, is that what you're saying?
No. There are still issues, but I don't think it's insurmountable. Now, I'll give you an example as well. So all the talk about AI, we think of these massive large language learning, large language models that.
That's one part of the AI.
Yeah, but actually the really important part's inference. And I was talking with a guy who runs AI platforms for investment bankers that are regulated. And he doesn't really mind where the training happens. Could be anywhere. It's just training. But inference has to be local, and it also has to be in data centers which are accredited and certified in the same way that the bank's own data centers would be.
Oh.
It's a really important difference. And that's why at the moment, we'll see a balance coming. Some of this stuff will head off to Iceland and Finland and so on, and a lot of it will stay local.
All right. Mark, any comment?
Yeah, I think, again, I'm sort of going to end up agreeing both with Duncan and Robert. I think you're going to see a lot more what I would call private wire solutions. Yes, I think there'll be a lot more collaboration and cooperation with utility providers, the power companies. I also think with government. I think government's going to be increasingly involved, because let's face it, unless government policy is correctly aligned, there will be no investment in utility. There will be no investment by the power companies, because they won't get a return. So I think it's one of the things that's missing in Ireland again at the moment is probably government policy. The government haven't really stepped on it, whereas you've seen here in the UK, the recent government have really sort of got behind data centers. So I think it needs that at a sort of a national government level. But yeah, I think you'll see more private wire, nuclear SMRs, that's one option. Or, if you've got a redundant nuclear power station lying around, you can recommission it. 3 Mile Island, I think, is the one, isn't it? So yeah, not many of those about though. But actually there is a great deal of capacity out there that is stranded. And what I mean by stranded capacity for power is it's not connected to a utility. There are lots of renewable projects which cannot necessarily connect into the grid because the utilities have not provided that interconnect. So I think what you're going to see is increasing numbers of data centers taking advantage of that, building their own or taking advantage of other capacity that's out there that is not actually available to the grid. Is it insurmountable? No. And I think we mentioned the cost. Yep. Okay. So you build a data center. What are you going to spend per megawatt in a data center? Depends where you are in the world, but let's say 10 to 12 million US. The IT that goes in there is another zero on the back of that. So yes, we look at the eye-watering numbers for data centers, but the IT that goes in, the amount that's being spent on NVIDIA or whatever, the GPUs, is astronomical. So actually, the cost of putting in the power to support it becomes, just another number, and those numbers are eye-watering. They really are. So there is money available to do this.
30 million a megawatt for GPUs,
There you
roughly.
go. But still,
Pounds.
and Robert, I'm looking at you, still talking about the challenges, but still on the investment side of it, because of the cost of power, even if it's lower, if you look on the IT related stuff, but still they choose different regions to go for or not to go for. So, I mean, the money, the cost of power or whatever is still. Is there a differentiator? Is it a differentiator?
It makes, I think, yes, of course, it makes a little bit of a difference. I mean, because of the European Union and the way that power distribution is working.
I'll come to the regulations.
Yeah, it doesn't really make such a humongous difference unless you make a special deal there with your own thermal plant up in Iceland there, where you can make your own deal, so to speak. But I would say that what you will have to see the clever solutions that was mentioned here, that a portion of the data is managed here at home because it is regulatory required to do so. It's data sensitivity. Other things that can go away to Iceland, they will be sent off to Iceland, number crunching. It will be out there and you bring it back when you need it. And then if you have sort of wind and solar generated power, you have to develop a proper power bank, batteries. They needs to be developed, and all of those things need to happen, and it's going to take time because these battery factories are prone to have problems. So so all of these things, they have to come together. Now, the cost aspect, yes, GPUs are particularly expensive items. And there I can see one way of solving it. And we have been working on a project where you had, as you mentioned before, containerized data centers, which are cheap and cheerful, and you can put them up in a mountain hill somewhere in the Nordics, and with automatic cooling, opening the window. That will make it cheaper, but the GPUs that are inside the containers are not going to get cheaper. So, and if you're very bankish about it, the off-takers of these AI generation, most of the companies, they live on venture capital at the moment. They don't have many years of track record. Profitability, we shouldn't even talk about. Eventually, there will be a little bit of sorting out here, differentiate between the guys who made it and those who didn't. So, and it comes back to your earlier conversation in the discussion here about, will these enormous data centers all be busy doing the cloud? Or will that be more distributed networks that I mentioned earlier? I think we will see a lot of optimization of what we have and what we need to build, and the people who has the more strings on their guitar, they will be able to use it more efficiently than others. So one horse ponies, they might have a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, you also see it on the working together. I mean, especially the hardware manufacturers, they make things as well, better and more efficient and whatever. So actually what you're saying, everything will be okay. The three of you. Eventually. Well, do we have time for eventually? But that's in the next session. I want to come to Elaine. If you hear the guys, they just told us everything will be okay. How does it work for you? Where do you see, well, guys, maybe you should wake up, or guys, we need more help here?
I think everything will be okay, actually. I'm coming from, so my office, Natera and the Natera Group, we're based out in Bulgaria. We've got 4 of our own data centers that I mentioned earlier. One is fairly new. I think it's about 18 months old, SDC2, and it was built with 18 kilowatts per rack. So we're already kind of quite high. And then our other data center, one of the others, SDC Stolnik, that's 100 kilowatts plus per rack. So we are prepared for that amount that needs to be done. And that data center is situated right next to a power station. So I'm coming from a very fortunate position where I'm like, good luck, everyone else, because I know that we're fine. We've got
just going over the fence and you click it in, right?
Yeah, literally, you can see everything. It connects everything. So I think I'm in a fortunate position at my company where I can see the data center. I know a lot of people who work in networking and connectivity, they don't see the physical infrastructure, but I'm lucky that I do. So it really helps when you see it to kind of understand the problem and the layout and the issues and everything. But the data centers, from our perspective, we've got at the moment enough power. I will caveat it a little bit because I know how much things are growing, have grown, have the potential to grow. And as we were saying, AI is just the way forward. Like everything kind of gets double checked with AI, even things that you don't really think about. Help on websites. That used to be a person, or at least some sort of basic robot. But now these are really sophisticated answering machines. They do so much, like even the AI in data centers. So you need to, as you're saying, like IT costs within a data center, you have whole programs that will tell you how to better run your own data center, which it's a little bit insulting. If you're a network engineer, you studied it for years, and now suddenly something that's uploaded all of the intelligence in the world is telling you you can optimize this better, like do this. But it's a good way to go, and I can only see that it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, and I remember our connectivity when I first started in telecoms, God, like 2011. I would be over the moon if someone came in and said, we have a requirement for like 250 meg, 500 meg. If it was a good deal, it would be 1 gig. If you needed to sit down and kind of breathe into a paper bag, it was a 10 gig request. And now it's just like 10 gig here, 10 gig there. Actually, can we take 100 gig? And you're just like 100 gig. And now, of course, it's doing 400. So if the power, the storage, and everything is going in the same way connectivity is, it's just going to be something else.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, I know since Brexit, there's a thingy, but the EU tends to, try to regulate everything possible, right? Now, we know that last year, 2024, they did something. Mark, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this one. What does it mean?
Sure. Well, we had two regulatory acts that came in from Europe. One was CSRD and one was EED that were specific to data centers. CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, was all about really, it's the non-financial reporting that was taken on beyond what was required in the past. The impact of CSRD is an interesting one. The real impact of CSRD, so the European Commission aren't going to police it necessarily themselves. What they're going to do is insist that you have a clear report, CSRD report, to give to a funding body, an investor, before you're going to be able to gain access to sustainable funding. That's really what's driving it. So the CSRD element is really going to be driven by effectively access to relatively cheap money. So that's CSRD in effect. CSRD is based on something called the EU taxonomy. The EU taxonomy references something called the EU Code of Conduct, which is a document that actually I've been editing for 10 years. So I kind of know it reasonably well. You didn't know that, did you? The other one is EED. EED is a little bit more involved in the sense that what EED is requiring, the Energy Efficiency Directive that is requiring reporting by data centers against certain metrics. And those metrics, generally speaking, are those that are referenced in an ISO standard called ISO 30134. I'm going to check you all later on this. And what that's doing. So EED, frankly, came in as a bit of a whimper rather than a bang, because the Commission were relatively slow in telling us what we needed to report on. So it really still hasn't had an impact. And I think the other thing to remember about the EED is the Commission don't want to break the sector. They realize how important the sector is supporting digital economies. So what they're doing is, I think they're introducing it gently. They're not being particularly prescriptive. They will change it over time, though. ED is one to watch. It'll grow over the years. One of the policy officers involved said to me, it took us 15 years to regulate the glass blowing industry. And you're going, what on earth are you talking about? What's that got to do with data centers? And she then said, well, you know, it's a high energy intensive industry. We don't know who's doing it. We don't know where they're doing it. And we don't know how much energy they're consuming to do it. And actually, that's kind of similar to the data center sector. So she said it took us 15 years, but we got there. So, you know, ED is one to watch. Did it really make a big difference last year? Got a whole bunch of people running around like headless chickens trying to work out what they were supposed to be doing. A lot of consternation, but the impact was fairly minimal. But watch this space, it will change.
So, okay. So whatever I'm saying is not true. I'm happy. Still, I want to throw this curveball. I think power will be an issue. I think that the regulations will have a far bigger impact than we see it today. Over time, more regulations will come because, yes, as what Britain did also last year, was it beginning of last year? It is as important as food and utilities, right? Full stop. Full stop. But I'm happy to have this discussion in 2 years again with this round, because I will tell you that power will become, unfortunately, an issue. Not only on the availability will be difficult, but also on costs, unfortunately. So we need to look at business models. We need to push everybody. Partnerships will be very important. And it might well be that the government will regulate even more the power. That's what I foresee, but I can be wrong, and I don't want to be pessimistic. I want to stop actually this panel discussion with optimistic things. So, Elaine? What can we expect? How beautiful is everything tomorrow?
I think
Scope the future for us.
just peachy. I think the thing that will separate some data set, so you've got your big, fancy, attractive data center names that everyone knows, but I won't say. And they're the ones that everyone wants to go into because the connectivity is already there. I think there's a lot of smaller, more independent brand names that have excellent facilities, but they're just not known as well. And because they're not known, they get pushed to the side.
But they're still funky.
Oh, yeah, they're all fantastic. They're all with all the correct ISOs in place and everything, and everyone's happy with all that kind of stuff. But it's just that if you think of, oh, I need to be in a London data center, you think of a certain brand. Oh, I need to be in New York, you think of a certain brand. And I think if more data centers, the smaller independent ones, if they were to gain something extra. I mean, I know I'm coming from a peering background, so I am biased 100%. I'll put my hand up. But I do think if more data centers, the smaller ones, were to connect with networks that provide different types of connectivity service to make them more attractive, like peering, then more people will come to them. They won't be, with their blinkers on, like, must go to this data center. They might get swayed because in these big data centers, you've got massive cross-connect fees that are sometimes more than actual service, which is painful. Whereas if you go to smaller independent ones, they don't need to do the insane markups. They're trying to attract people, whereas some of the data centers are like, if you want to be here, that's the price you have to pay. But I think the independent ones are more humble, and they're doing it for the good of the internet. And that's the kind of ethos behind peering as well. So I think it's like a nice handshake of partnership to partnership, peering, data center services, better connectivity, better internet. Everyone's happy, in my opinion.
And by the way, you can see her and you can call her.
You can. I'll be happy to answer any peering questions or connectivity questions. Not a problem.
There you go. There you go. Thank you, Elaine. Duncan, please, what's your takeaway?
So I think Elaine's absolutely right. Peering is incredibly important. And as far as I'm concerned, every POP and every data center should be an internet exchange, right? Simple. And it's partly because the next generation of applications needs that. So they need data to be kept local. It can't be tromboning all over the country between the internet exchanges anymore. It's just not going to work. So the network is going to become really, really important as part of the move towards a distributed environment. But I think that's actually the next generation of stuff is going to be compute at the edge, a lot of peering and local traffic control. And that's going to open up a massive amount of new applications that we can only sort of dream about right now.
Thank you. Robert, what message do you want to?
No, but I think we can say that sort of edge DCs, they are coming. Distributed data centers connected with fiber, dedicated fiber is already happening. I think it's happening relatively quietly in the background, slowly but safely taking care of traffic jams here and there, whether the traffic jam is created by lack of power or lack of land, depending on where you are. I mean, in some of the European countries, they're not as blessed as Sweden and the other countries with a large country and small population. So you have a lot of you have a lot of solutions that are coming out of out of necessity, and when they're applying them, they are starting realizing that this is quite wise. And one of the hyperscalers I mentioned before, they are already doing it. They are doing it in Americas, they're doing it in Europe, and eventually they will do it in Asia as well. The big work when it comes to connectivity is going to be in Asia, because they sort of came to the internet world through wireless, and with the traffic volumes we're talking about right now, you have to go wireline, you have to go fiber, and you're seeing a lot of subsea cable being laid by telcos, but as well by the big off-takers, and you're seeing a lot of assistance in renewing the subsea cable with not so friendly assistance, but it's happening, and that will also create more connectivity, better pipelines. You don't necessarily need to have a 100 gigawatt on that side. You can actually have 10 here, 10 there, 10 there, and then connect it.
Okay, thank you. Mark, famous last words.
I think if there's one thing I would like to say, and this kind of goes back to demand, if there's one thing I'd like to say about the sector, I think we're a very misunderstood sector. And I think, the thing I'd like to say is there's an onus on all of us to try and better educate the public and government about what data centers really are and the services they offer. If you think about it, we talk about increased power demand in data centers, we talk about increased, resource demand generally, but who actually creates that demand? It's not the buildings, it's not the data centers, it's us. We're the demand creators, and I think we need to educate the public and the media a little bit more about that, and get people on the right page with data centers. Yes, we are going to have more of them, but let's make sure that people understand why we have more of them and take advantage of them. That'd be my request to the planet, I guess.
But also a task to educate people, right? Okay. And with that, I would like to thank the audience for being here, listening to us. In 5 minutes, we'll continue. Please come in, gentlemen. In 5 minutes, we'll continue talking about messaging. But before doing that, I would thank big time my panel and my fellow executives with the senior look on the business. So Elaine, thank you so much. Duncan, thank you so much. Robert, as always, thank you. Mark, thank you so much. Stay tuned.